Hi, we are Thomas and Annette, both are from Appinoka Regenerative Farming. Recently we had the opportunity to have a little talk and a presentation at a local farming show, the Huon show in the Huon Valley, Tasmania. And after the talk we've had quite a few inquiries and people who wanted to know a little bit about our story, where we come from and why we do what we do. So we wanted to take this opportunity to share it with you too, and thank you for watching. Maybe just a little bit of background about ourselves. We are originally from South Africa. We've also spent some time in a few different countries. Thomas will tell you a bit more about that, but that's basically where our story started, and we'll go into a bit more detail as we share some photos with you.
As Nanette said, we did spend some time in the Philippines, and during our time in the Philippines we traveled a lot to some of the Asian countries. I spent a lot of time in China, and we did traveling through some of the biggest cities in those areas. And what we realized, and what you see in these pictures, is highly developed metropolitan areas and highly populated areas. And we, looking at these ones, we were thinking, and at that stage, and most probably this is what's happening, is the world is getting more populated and less areas are actually available for farmers to grow food. And we were realizing that that's going to be a concern for us in future, because we don't know where our food comes from, we don't know how people actually prepared the food, how the animals were treated, how the plants were treated, and what did they use on the different areas. And we realized that we can't control all of it, but what we can control, we would like to control, or to have influence on it, and enjoy trying to do that. So the closest comparison what we have, and we don't surf, but the closest comparison we had is if you would try to surf, and in this example, and you'll see in the slides going forward, is that we weren't at all experienced in surfing. And we realized one of the first things, that if you want to surf, is to choose a bay or choose a country or a beach or an area that you want to go and surf. You don't want to go and surf in a harbor, as an example, or you don't want to go and surf where it's unsafe, but you want to go and surf where the conditions are correct. And the conditions in those environments that we were staying weren't ideal for us to start growing and producing food for ourselves.
I reckon pretty much when we were kind of in the phase where we had to make a choice or a decision on this, and even in my mind getting the picture of being in the ocean, and on the one side looking towards the shore and seeing waves, and perhaps making the choice of turning around and going in the direction where it's calmer and easier to perhaps stay on your board, if I can put it that way, or making the choice and knowing that sometimes you're going to have to kick like mad to try and get to that wave. But for taking up that challenge and being willing to do that, to try and catch the wave and ride it. And I reckon this slide, these pictures on this slide, really summarizes why, or a big part of why we chose to try and kick like mad and hopefully reach the wave one day. Or yes, and most of these pictures of course involve our children. So you want to come and say hi? This is Rico. Your face in there. There we go. Johnny. This is a little trickier than it looks to fit everyone in. And then Dion.
We're trying to learn to surf this one as well. Jump!
Yeah. Oh, there we go. Yeah, that was a very big, or played a very big part in the decision we made. And of course, not only growing food for ourselves, but looking towards the future to where food comes from, and giving these guys the opportunity to be part of that, and growing up being part of that too. And then that plate of food, I think it's also on the left hand side, I hope, for you watching. But that was the first plate of food where everything came from our farm, And it was quite a journey to get there, and many lessons learned, and bumps that we had to face. But when we had that for the first time, we realized that it is actually possible, and somehow we might be able to make it work.
Yep. So we decided that we selected a bay where we want to go and surf, and we actually came on a holiday to Tasmania looking for a place where we can have a winter holiday while we were in the Philippines. And we came for holiday to Tasmania, and we saw all the small farms as we flew into Launceston, and we realized that maybe over here there's a bay that we would like to learn how to surf. And we spent some months in New South Wales, and then later we started moving down to Tassie, and going through the Tassie, or most probably everywhere in Australia where accommodation and land is limited, and to enter the property market is quite difficult. We found this piece of land which you see on this presentation. It was an old apple orchard, and it was predominantly used to run some cattle on it. It had a lot of work to be done on it. The dam was broken slightly, the fences were old and run down, and there was absolutely nothing on it. It sold as a clean canvas, and that's how we started on it. But we found it a bay that we thought would be safe for us to surf, and the only thing that we had to do now is basically learn to surf.
Maybe just to add to that before we continue, is when we bought the piece of land, as Thomas said, there was a lot of work to be done. It was really run down, and before we could even start to think of ways that we can start to grow things, or doing those, or starting those exciting bits, there were so many things to deal with and get rid of first, of broken fences, lots of things lying around the place. It was quite a mission to be able to get rid of that first before we could start. But also something that was interesting when we got the piece of land. Well, the one part wasn't that interesting. It was, honestly, because it was so run down, there wasn't a spot on this piece of land where you could even get a garden fork into the, you can hardly call it soil, but yes, into the ground.
We thought the whole place was rock and shale.
Yeah, it was the ground was really, there was nothing to be grown on it at the time. And also we thought Tasmania was too cold for earthworms, because there wasn't any sign of earthworm activity to be seen on the block, let alone try and dig and hopefully find something. There just wasn't anything.
Yeah, and if you remember that picture of the dam was white. The water was white, and we thought, well, it's most probably just run down water or silt from the clay. But it was known that some of these areas were used a lot of herbicides, and what we learned later is what a bad influence some of those herbicides, and especially the wetting agents in these herbicides, have on water life, or life in water areas. So yes, we approached the bay, we saw the waves, we grabbed the boards and jumped into the ocean and thought, okay, we're gonna surf now. And like Nanette said, we realized that we were taking on waves that we weren't trained for. So we jumped in and started learning, and we learned a lot. A lot of places that we learned a lot from was Darren Doherty, another Australian trying or doing it quite well with the Rexy program in Australia. They're focusing on regenerative agriculture in itself. One of the great books that we've read was Dirt to Soil from Gabe Brown, and a lot of learnings from him and experience from him. And then someone from Africa, Zimbabwe, Alan Savory, which a lot of our cell grazing philosophy that we're trying to do, and the animal movement, what we're trying to do, is based on his holistic approach in that sense. And then what you see at the top, that's P.E. Yeomans, Australian, that developed a landscape theory, how to manage landscapes. And we learned a lot, and we applied some of that, and we're still learning as we're going. So a lot of these areas, and then of course Joel Sullivan, which is doing what we're trying to do, but in a large scale and much more experience. He's done this across different diverse enterprises, and he's in the USA, and we've learned a lot from him, even in structure and equipment use within the space. Further learnings closer to the farming and the market garden. We read John Martin Fortier's book, I don't know, 3-4 times, and most probably referencing it still. Watch his videos, still follows a lot of his videos, and of course Richard Perkins. Richard Perkins, we started his program, so he has an online program that he teaches regenerative agriculture and designing small farms. We did his course, we started doing his course when we were still in the Philippines, but we didn't have a place to actually practice it. And what we've realized is it's extremely context based. So a lot of this is, you have to apply it within an area that you're actually doing something and can monitor the soil and realize and start understanding the climate and the people around it, and yourself. And then just as a basis, all of this and our approach to a lot of this is based on lean philosophy, or the Toyota way, which was originally implemented in the manufacturing environment. But one of the main important things of that is it's based on 3 principles for us, and it's people, and the value that we have in people. And when we say people, it's not just our customers, it's ourselves. And if a product is good enough for ourselves, we believe it will be good enough for the customers. And that's why we also don't produce food that we don't prefer or that we don't like. And it's a great quality thing for us. And if we don't get that quality of life from what we're doing, we don't see the value in it. And then another 2 major principles in that is the velocity of flow. And it just speaks of that holistic approach, or the flow between things, that you don't want to create something that contradicts what you're trying to do. So we don't want to go and say we want to do organic farming, and then on the one side we use treated posts, or we use herbicide and spot spraying on our perimeter, because it goes against that philosophy, that flow that we want to establish. And then last but not the least is quality, and we believe maybe sometimes, and we struggle with that, is to go slower. And by going slower, you're actually going faster, because you focus on the quality of what you're trying to do. And by focusing on a regenerative approach is basically going slower, because you focus on that quality side of it. There's a faster way to use a herbicide, or to plow the soil, or to destroy something in a quick way. But by doing that, by going faster, you're actually destroying the soil, and in long term you will eventually go slow in that sense. And then the past year we've learned a lot being on the Sprout program. It's a Tasmanian initiative, and we would definitely recommend that for any other small farmers. We've learned a lot, made a lot of connections, networks, and that's basically in a broad spectrum what we've learned. There's a lot of other places that we've learned more. Maybe just something quick on Pat Colby, Australian experience writer, and I think she's a vet. Yeah,
I think so, yeah.
On natural remedies or natural farming, and I think she's finished a book on sheep, goats, and cattle, and a lot of the principles in that we're using on the sheep and cattle, and even the pigs that we currently running. But yes, so this was us studying how to surf and standing on the board and increasing our holding capacity and our floating capacity and all of that, but we weren't swimming yet, or we weren't surfing, and we weren't standing on the board.
No, you need to speak about this.
So this is a recent farm app that we've done. And a lot of the time people will come to us and say, but you're doing so many diverse things and it almost looks random, but it's not random. It's that we're really trying to create a diverse, holistic, or a broad a broad system, that you actually create a symbiosis between the different systems that we're trying to do. So for instance, when we go later into what we're trying to explain, we have different animals doing certain pieces of work on the farm, which other animals are following up and cleaning up after them. And then we have plants growing in that space. So this is just a short picture of what we're trying to do in the different areas. And we would normally try to go and plan, well, we've not been running this more than 3-4 years, but we would try and plan what we want to do eventually in some areas. So if you would go into holistic farming, there's areas of levels of permanence, and things like your perimeter fencing is a permanent infrastructure implementation. So we did that first time because we know where the perimeter of our block is, except if we expand in the future, but we know where it is, so we went and put that fencing up. And then we established where we want to plant trees, where we're going to build a house, where we're going to build roads, because roads are major catchment areas of clean water, because we know we don't spray on our block. So if we build roads on our farm and we build it in such a way that we can actually capture water, you can capture a lot of clean water on your own farm. So this is just a short map of what we're trying to do. So it's not that we just run into the ocean and jump on the first wave that we get. There's some thinking behind it. Some.
Yeah, this picture
is washing.
that too. Lots of it. Yeah, but anyway, when you think about farming, and perhaps, I guess I even thought about it a little bit that way before we got started. When you hear about farming, or you envision being on a farm, the lifestyle that relates to that or has to do with it, it's often a beautiful picture, and perhaps often a bit of a romantic picture, with beautiful views and water and healthy animals and everything growing well and no weeds, food to choose from where you know where it comes from. But the reality of it is many hours of work. And this picture just puts that into perspective. It's not only Thomas and myself being out there on the farm on a weekend or before work or after work. Yeah, we didn't really add that, but both of us still work full-time off farm. And the reality of that is often what is summarized in this picture. It does involve missing out on other things. It does involve getting the kids part of it. For them, a Saturday is farm work, and not that we expect them working all day Saturday, but it is being involved with what we do, being around everything that we do, and this is pretty much what
it's a lifestyle.
It is a lifestyle.
It's, yeah, we're
And
trying to pull that into a business model whereby it becomes an enterprise to sustain that. But it first of all must be something that you're passionate about and that you're actually willing to sacrifice for that. And yes,
it is hard work, and it's supposed to be hard work. It's not only nice and beautiful.
Yeah, it's not a quick Instagram or a YouTube video and then you just run off into the field and the sheep just are happy.
It would have been really nice if it was like that.
Yeah. So this is an illustration of what we tried to do in the beginning, and we jumped into the ocean and we realized that we can actually stand on a board, and we start kicking, and we went and bought sheep, and we went and bought saddle grazed fencing, and over here we had a tractor, and you can see in the field we mowed some nice square angles, squares into the field, and everything was exact, and it was a lot of work. So we had a few sheep in the block, and we introduced them predominantly because they love blackberries, and we had a lot of them. Our options with the blackberries again was to go and fight it, go and try and build a harbour, try and control the waves, and then we realized if as soon as we do that, we don't have a beach or a bay where we can actually surf, and we wanted to surf. So we introduced these lovely creatures that climbs underneath fences, and yes, yeah.
Yeah, and then after the sheep were the first things that we added. Of course, everything that you do, you have to take many different things into consideration, but budget is one of them. And we knew we had to get something to try and keep the grass down, and that's why sheep was the first thing that we added to the block. After that, we were really keen to start getting some diversity. There wasn't any diversity when we got the block. Hardly anything was growing, as we mentioned before. But
There were different species of ryegrass.
yeah, okay, does that count? Anyway, we part of when we did our farm planning, we had to plant a shelter belt of trees around our entire block, and that little seedling there, we bought tree seedlings. It was blackwoods. We bought them in and planted our entire boundary fence with trees. It was about 300 of them. Okay?
Yeah, or close to 400 eventually. And yeah, we just want to establish more diversity, especially on, it's not a big farm. The farm is 34 acres or 14 hectares. And we want to establish that wherever we have a bit of space where we can give back to diversity or give back to the natural environment, we try and do and use those boundary points for that purpose specifically. Over here you can see the sheep is feeding down that corridor, and yeah, they're not normally in that area because they also love blackwoods.
But that photo with the hands and the seed mix, so we made up our own mix that we ordered from pretty much any seed that they had available at the time where we ordered from, and it was a mix of grasses, brassicas, legumes. It was about 34
wheat species, yeah, and then we went to the local agricultural supplies, and we just went and added oats to it, and wheat, and beans, all the feed mixes. We went and add that just to create more diversity. And some of those seeds came up when the climate was ideal for it. Some of it's now only coming up.
Yeah, a couple of years
later
from when we sown it.
And we're still using that wherever there's an exposed piece of land, we're still using it. So this picture is the first establishment of our own market garden. So I mean, when we started this whole thing, this was us homesteading. We were creating food for ourselves, and we realized that we'll have to try and grow vegetables for ourselves. So this is a small strawberry patch that we had at that stage. We started with 1 or 2 square meters, and then after the 1 or 2 square meters, all the strawberries were eaten up by the birds and everything, wildlife around it, and we thought we'll go slightly bigger. And when we went bigger, it was a bit too much for ourselves, but we still enjoyed it. You can still see over here some electric poly fencing that we had around it. But yeah, maybe what you see over here is a small block of garden built, and this is important, built on top of a layer of clay on a piece of soil that when we tested it, they said you can't use that for agricultural use because the soil is just that poor. So we said, well, we actually want to build soil, so we physically went and built soil on top of it, and we added a lot of organic material on top of that piece of land, which is now currently growing very furiously some weeds, which we have to get into.
Yes, maybe just to add to that, that's the first little market garden bit that we started on, and we did that with shovels and wheelbarrows. We didn't have any other equipment then. It was a lot of wheelbarrows, but even after that, it's the first garden area or market garden that we built and started growing for ourselves. But even from that, that's also where a new phase of learning started, because even though we read many books and we watched many videos, did training courses, all of that is absolutely invaluable, but you have to start doing it on your own, or in your own place where you want to try and farm.
Your own microclimate as well.
Yes, and starting to learn the land and what works well and what doesn't. And basically this whole market garden that we had here, we had to change everything and pretty much start from scratch, because when we went through winter, it was our first winter year, we realized that the drainage will never work the way that we set it up. And that's something we didn't know before, and until it started raining and until we faced issues with that. And really struggled with drainage, so we had to change the direction of all the beds, and that's a learning curve that you have to be willing to keep learning and changing, making changes, to make it more suitable, and also to live with the land and with nature.
Yep. So after we had the sheep, we had a small market garden that we started producing for ourselves. We realized that we really wanted to add some cows to the mix, and we bought we bought them as jerseys. They're now slightly bigger and they're a happy breed. Some of them are jerseys, some of them have a little bit something else to it. This is just a picture of the kids and our Maremma. So we got a Maremma dog into the mix because we thought, we're going to do chickens in the future, and we'll have to protect the chickens or warn the chickens of any wildlife in the area, and we had to get a Maremma, of course. So just here the picture of the cattle. We have a lot of sag bushes, which is most probably provident because of the soil that we have, and not a lot of water movement through the soil or stagnating water. Although the soil is quite shallow over here, we realized that some of the cows actually do eat the sag bushes if they're worn down. So if you do cell grazing and they actually start stepping on the sag bushes, they will start eating it. And that's maybe just something that we started learning, trying to jump onto the surfboard. Yes, so what we started doing in the bottom area of the block, there were areas when we bought the block and where we had the sheep. I don't know if you remember the slide in the beginning with the square areas that we moved the cattle around. In that area there was some of the valleys that started forming a lot of water and was drenched in water, and then on the ridges, these spots over here were so dry that during the summer those areas will die down. And then reading P. Yeoman's book and understanding more of it, we started applying some of that philosophy, whereby we identified the key points or the key line points, and we started moving or averaging basically the water across our block and trying to keep some of that water capacity back. So we went down to Bunnings, bought a clear 30-meter hose, and the neighbors were driving past. We were walking up and down the paddock, spraying marks on the paddock, and we formed our first key lines, and that's what you see in this picture here. And it does work. As an example, what we measured it on is that the first year when we had our animals, we went and bought almost 250 square bales, and we fed that out to the animals throughout the winter, throughout the summer, the winter when we didn't have feed. This past year is the first time which we were classified basically as a drought in Tassie, and we bought 50 square bales. We didn't use all of them because we needed to use them. We used them just as a filler when we couldn't get to the animals in the time that we had to move them. So it was just to balance that velocity and flow between the cells that we went and actually fed the animals. But there was enough feed on the paddock
to last through the winter.
To last through the winter this time. And we had an increase in animals. All those happy small animals that you see, they do grow up to big cows and big sheep.
Yeah, so starting from sheep, then adding cows, we wanted to keep adding diversity, bringing more in, so chickens was the obvious next thing to bring in. What works really well in the cycle is how we run them. We run the sheep and the cattle together, still doing cell grazing, similar to what you saw in that square photo. And we have the cows and the sheep, the cattle and the sheep in an area for about 2 or 3 days, depending on the growth in the area, the grasses that are available, the feed that's available. And then we let that block of land rest for a couple of days, after which we bring the chickens in. Those rest days just give enough time for flies to lay eggs in the manure, for worms to start doing its thing, and then by the time the chickens come in, they eat the larvae from the fly eggs, little bugs and critters and things that they can find. It's good for the chickens, it's good for the soil health, and of course the other thing that they do is they spread the manure from the cattle and the sheep around, which makes such a big difference. It's something that we don't have to do, and it's all happening naturally, and the cycle starts to work. And it's really exciting to see the things starting to work together. Do you want to add something else?
No.
All right, more diversity. It was time for something else. So we added some pigs. We had 2 sows and then got a little boar not too long after that. We got the pigs. The main reason we wanted them, we had different areas on the block where we couldn't get in. Well, you could hardly walk there, honestly, let alone get in with a tractor or equipment to try and manage the land a little bit. We had areas with lots of eucalypt regrowth, lots of sag bushes, the ones you see in the pictures, and we really needed help to get that under control. We heard that pigs might be good for things like that, so we figured we will give it a go. And the difference that the pigs have made have been absolutely incredible. So we do the same or a very similar thing as we do with the cows, the sheep, and the chickens. We also do, call it cell grazing, with the pigs, but they're pasture raised. So we bring them into a new area of land. It's quite interesting to watch when you bring them into a new area. They're grazers first, so they go and graze on whatever is available, and then after that they will start to dig up and look for roots and things, under little bugs and things as well, underneath the ground. That has made such a difference with the sag bushes, especially, which has a massive root ball. You can't really just get rid of them with equipment even.
No.
You definitely can't pull them out. But the pigs go in underneath, they start eating the root ball, and gradually they get rid of those big sag bushes. Of course, they also move around in the area, and they dig and trample, and again, everything starts working together. The other thing that they're really good for is strawberry waste. Anything really that comes out of the garden that they can eat.
Yeah, a lot of the waste products will normally take that through to the pigs. You can see in this picture at the bottom they're eating potatoes. So during our potato harvest, some of the potatoes will get damaged, and that goes to the pigs, and they do love fresh potatoes. But you can also see in this picture the the pigs were kept in sheep rails or steel rails, and then later we changed that to electric fencing. But it's all part of that movable system whereby we use them in a certain area on the farm. They are helping us, we are helping them, they have a good time, and they fit within that flow within the farm environment. This is just maybe some pictures and a lot of the equipment that we use and build on the farm. So that's a brooder that we have, and it's mobile, so it has an axle with wheels on it. There's electric fencing mobile, so a lot of the things is extremely mobile and flexible, so we can use it. So we use that brooder in the beginning to grow up some chicks that we had to grow for ourselves, and then later we would use the same brooder because it's insulated to start seedlings. It's just that flexibility that we have, and as soon as you do that, we tend to go closer to surfing than the closest example that we have is to go and build a harbor. And we realized early that we can't control the climate, we can't control the macro environment, but we can be flexible around it, and we can utilize it to our advantage to the best that we can.
Just some more pictures of, well, this one in particular is the chicken tractor or chicken caravan being built, also mobile. Makes it easy to move around the paddock, of course, which happens a couple of times a week.
Yeah, and that's greenhouse crop protection that we have, and we would start our seedlings over here and then move that into the field. And over there you can see some seeding trays that we've built where we start the seedlings. And this is a more recent picture, maybe a year ago, where some of our cows weren't calves anymore and they started having calves, and there were growth, and you can see already over here the different condition of the soil. We don't have areas which is uncovered. We don't use sprays. If we want to kill the area where we will actually want to go and plant something, we would normally tarp it, put a tarp over it and take the sun away. And the worms love it. They go in and break down everything what we want to do in that area. Over here you can see the areas with where the key lines are at the back, and we don't feed the animals on that space. We leave the key lines or the swales for the grass to grow up and be like a seed bank to spread the seeds across the paddock. And then the strawberry patch that we had in the beginning increased to a few thousand strawberries, just because strawberries is one of the main crops in Australia and most probably in the world that has the most herbicides and pesticides used on it. And a lot of strawberries that you would get in the shop in large commercial production models doesn't taste like strawberries used to taste when we were kids. And most probably when you speak to your grandparents, they will tell you fruit and a lot of vegetables don't taste like they used to taste. And that's the drive that we're trying to do, is to create fruit and vegetables, or not to create it, to produce it how it's supposed to be, closer to that health point. And yeah, we started our first pick your owns, whereby we had too much whereby we can go and pick, and we opened up for the community to come and have a go.
That's a picture of we've got one polytunnel at the moment. Definitely plan to add some more at some stage. But yes, I guess a bit of a picture of garden beds being built on the left hand side. At the bottom you can see the polytunnel still being built. We've got the frame up there, the area tarped, as Thomas mentioned earlier, to get the weeds under control and turning that paddock area into garden beds. And then on the right hand side there's one where we've got some seedlings in. We've got tomatoes, cucumbers, capsicums and eggplants in the polytunnel at the moment as well. And as you can see in that picture, inside the polytunnel there are certain things that you can do right away and other things that you need to learn on the go. In that picture we had cardboard down in the pathways to try and help with weed control in the paths. It definitely helped with the weeds. It's not very practical longer term. You can see it's pretty moist and muddy even in that picture, but that's something that we've had to be flexible with and learn and change. Yeah, and then we actually got quite a few inquiries about sharing our story and sharing what we do, and that's been a really exciting part to add for us. It's good sharing a story. It's nice to get other people involved and excited about growing good food that tastes good, and being able to share that. So
and show what it entails to grow good food.
yes.
And why is food in, you most probably have heard this, is why is food so cheap sometimes? And you have to ask the question, why is it possible? And we recently walked into one of the big supermarkets, and they were selling pork hams at $8 a kilogram, and we thought, like, how is it possible that you can produce a perfect pig in a healthy pig in a healthy environment at that price point? And people ask that question, is like, when they see the amount of work that it is to grow strawberries without spraying, they don't ask, the price point doesn't become an issue, because they realize what they're actually receiving.
So education has been a really big
it's not
an exciting part of it.
It is not and we can most probably say it, it's not a tourist focus point. It is education focused. And yes, it is, you can see it as an enjoyment when you come out to the day, but the focus of it is education in what we're trying to sell. And there are quite a few farmers in Tasmania, as well as what in Australia and most probably globally, that's attempting to go back to this model. So this model might sound very new and very flashy, the diversity, but this is how farms used to be before we started realizing that we can use all wonder chemicals that are currently being used. And then we do try some other things, and we did this year a few hundred tulips, and we realized that tulips actually grow quite nicely. So sometimes it's nice to just do something else. It's not just about farming and producing for ourselves and producing for the community. It's sometimes just doing something like this. And we recently had some of our neighbors that came and stopped at our place and said they had more visitors coming to their place because they were driving past our block and see the tulips and just come and look at the tulips over the fence. So it's nice giving back to the community in that way. So yes, we are surfing, and sometimes you realize some of the ways you have to dive underneath them, and some of the ways you have to swim a little bit deeper to catch another wave. But we do still enjoy surfing it, I think.
Most of the time.
Most of the time.
Yeah, and that's a little drone photo of what our farm looks like now, quite different to the first picture and the clean canvas you saw. Way more growth, way more diversity, many hours of work, but really exciting. And definitely.
You can see the color in the dam over here that we were talking about, yes. The diversity that started in the dam. And I don't know if we said in the beginning, when we came to Tasmania, we thought it's too cold for earthworms. We thought the soil is too cold, because we couldn't find any earthworms nowhere. And as soon as the soil and the diversity started picking up, and we started building soil and started building organic matter into the soil, we started finding earthworms everywhere, as well as the chickens also do that. But yeah, and the color of the dam started changing. Frogs started coming back. When we open the windows, we can hear the frogs now, and you can see the diversity. Yes, and we believe that's a healthy system.
Yeah, that's our story in a nutshell. Perhaps just one thing, because that's something we often get asked, is our farm name, where that comes from and what it means. Appinoka, and you'll see the thumbs up there. One of our kids, Rico, that you met earlier, when he was little, he was just starting to talk, and he didn't really have many words yet, but he would often, when you asked him about something, he would refer to something as Appinoka. And our first language, or our home language, is Afrikaans, but Appinoka is not a word in Afrikaans, and of course it's not a word in English. But he was using it as if it was a real word. And when he was able to talk a little bit more or explain himself a little bit more, we asked him, what does Appinoka mean? And he kind of looked at us like we were crazy. And he said, no, it means thumbs up. It means good. And well, from that time, it really stuck.
Yeah,
And
it's
it became a word between our friends and family. And whenever you refer to something as being good or being, yeah,
thumbs up.
it's Appinoka. When we came to Tasmania and found this little piece of land and decided on a farm name, that was the perfect fit.
So Appinoka, yeah, this is most probably a first video that we're trying to do. We want to actually start developing videos on the journey that we're going on, and maybe the timeline that we've developed up to now, and what is our future plans, and maybe just some of our learnings that other people can learn from that, and we can learn as well.
Thanks for watching.
Catch the perfect wave. Thank you.